Israel attacked Iran and said its objectives have been achieved. Its military said the strikes were precise and warned Tehran against further escalation. But what if Iran responds? And could the two sides be on a path to a full-blown confrontation? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Cyril Vanier. Completed, the words of Israel after its military carried out an attack against Iran. It said the strikes were in response to what it called months of continuous attacks from Iran, while Tehran said the damage was limited. Israel has stepped up its attacks against Iranian-backed groups in Lebanon and Syria and Iran. Now the Iranian leadership is threatening to retaliate. Could this cycle of violence lead to a broader regional conflict? We'll get to our guests in a moment. First, though, this report from Alex Baird.
Yet another escalation for a region on edge. Israel launching what it's called targeted and precise strikes across Iran. It attacked military bases and missile sites near the capital Tehran and in the western provinces of Elam and Khuzestan. Tehran says 2 military personnel were killed, but the damage was limited. Israeli officials say their attack was in response to Iranian missile strikes earlier this month.
The Israel Defense Forces has fulfilled its mission. If the regime in Iran were to make the mistake of beginning a new round of escalation, we will be obligated to respond. Our message is clear. All those who threaten the state of Israel and seek to drag the region into wider escalation will pay a heavy price.
Iran's foreign ministry has condemned Israel's latest strikes, calling them a blatant violation of international law, and it says Iran has an inherent right to self-defense. This is the latest attack in a cycle of violence that has intensified since Israel launched its war on Gaza. In April, Israel bombed Iran's consulate in Damascus, killing 13 people. Just under 2 weeks later, Tehran responded by launching hundreds of missiles and drones at Israel in its first such direct attack. The following month saw a number of Israeli assassinations of Hamas and Hezbollah leaders. And on October 1st, Iran cited those killings for launching nearly 200 missiles towards Israel. Leaders across the Middle East have condemned the latest Israeli strikes and are now calling for calm. Alex Baird, Al Jazeera, for Inside Story.
Let's bring in our guests now. In Tel Aviv, Yossi Beilin is a former Israeli Minister of Justice who initiated negotiations for the Oslo Peace Accords. In Tehran, Mohammad Marandi, Professor of American Studies at the University of Tehran. You were also a media advisor to the Iranian negotiating team at the International Atomic Energy Agency. And in Cambridge, in the UK, Roxane Farmanfarmaian, a professor of modern Middle East politics at the University of Cambridge. A warm welcome to each and all of you. Mohammad, you're in Tehran. We're going to start with you. As the Iranian president, and perhaps more importantly, the Iranian supreme leader, were being given, in the last few hours, as we record this, in the last few hours, a precise damage assessment of Israel's attacks on Iran. Given that they've been expecting this in some way, shape, or form, how do you think they felt about these attacks? How do you think they analyzed that?
I think they feel that the damage that was caused as a result of the attack was much less than they had anticipated. The Iranian missile defenses were able to bring down a significant number of missiles. And also there were a lot of decoys and dummies used and false intelligence given so that some of the missiles mistook those decoys for the real thing. There was damage, of course, but today we see that the markets across the country and in Tehran in particular are very positive. So it would seem that society at large also believes that the Israelis did not do well in this attack.
Since you mentioned society at large, can you give us sort of the flavor, the color of talk on the streets in Tehran and across the country on how people are processing this?
Well, I can only give anecdotal evidence, but in general, the perception seems to be that this was much less effective than the Iranian retaliatory strike that was carried out against the Israeli regime a few weeks ago. And the perception was that, for example, in Tehran, since there were no explosions in the city, many people didn't even wake up. I only woke up because Al Jazeera and RT called me. So I think that in general, people felt that this was not a major event. Of course, there were strikes, there were targets, but it didn't have the sort of impact that maybe many people were concerned about.
Okay, Yossi Beilin in Tel Aviv, how's the attack being perceived in Israel? I mean, the Israeli military, of course, says it is a success, that they hit what they wanted to hit. We understand that they hit mostly missile production facilities and some missile launching systems, surface-to-air missiles is what I'm reading. But there's also criticism of the prime minister for not hitting Iran harder.
Yeah, there are always people who would criticize the leadership of the day for not hitting or striking harder. I'm not one of them. I was not sure that the whole idea of striking Iran now was the relevant idea, although it was our turn, so-called, in our kindergarten. But I'm glad that it is not a major attack, and both sides are telling their public opinions. On the Iranian side, that it was no harm almost. On the Israeli side, that it was successful and accurate, and all the airplanes returned to Israel. So it is a situation which doesn't call for a continuation of this vicious circle, and enables us all to think about the future.
What's the same question that I asked Mohammad? What's the word on the street in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, in Israel? How are people feeling about the attack? How are they perceiving it and talking about it?
Well, I don't know much better than yourself. It is Saturday, and it is a very quiet day today. I don't see people dancing in the streets, and not the other way around.
Okay. Let's take this to Roxane Farmanfarmaian. How do you analyze the attacks? And I will add this. We knew these attacks were coming. That's not a surprise. The big question was, how big were they going to be? What was going to be struck? Were any symbolic, really high-value targets going to be struck that might force Iran's hand? And would they ultimately lead to further escalation or de-escalation? Within that context, how do you analyze those attacks?
Well, I think there's general relief. I think there is a sense that this was a tit for tat rather than an escalation. I think there is a great deal of lead up that went into this. There had been a sense that the retaliation from Israel would be greater, and that the plans for that were leaked in the midst of a great deal of American pressure to ensure that the nuclear sites and that the oil sites were not hit in Iran. And therefore, I think this comes in the wake of a sense that there's been some collaboration, that the Israelis have taken on board the concerns that the U.S. put forward, and that this was largely symbolic. Of course, there were a couple of already announced fatalities by the Iranian military. Probably there will be a few more, but it is definitely not a large-scale attack. So there's no sense that this has escalated the situation, and or in fact hit at Iran in ways that Iran did not hit originally at Israel. So I think there's very much an evening the game here, and a sense that both states can step back without feeling as though their publics or those that are their allies will consider them to have been weak or weak-livered about it.
Roxane, the Iranian Foreign Ministry published a statement saying it now has a duty, a right, and a duty to defend itself. So what do you expect? That means, I guess it's fair to expect Iran to do something, but what that something will be, of course, we don't know.
We don't know, and I'm not so sure. We've heard this kind of language before,
Yes.
On both sides, by the way, and I think that does not always trigger an immediate military response. I think it is simply a strong response by a sovereign state saying, we have this right, should we decide to take it, to do something, and because we have had our territory attacked. But I don't think that there is much reason to, unless some of the other parts of this rather diversified war creates a situation where the Iranians again feel as though they need to move. So in the past, the reason they did send the second barrage of missiles towards Israel was in the wake of several major assassinations, including Nasrallah of Hezbollah in Lebanon. And I think if there's something large that happens again like that, there will be this opening because it has made this statement. But I think at the moment, there's little reason to expect that it will make a retaliatory move.
Okay, but that's kind of the reason I wanted to put in our viewers' radar. You said they can sort of claim, and I'm paraphrasing here. Correct me if I'm paraphrasing wrongly, but they can kind of keep this claim to having a right to strike Israel again and use it if and when they choose to. We've seen Iran do this before, right? When Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated in Tehran, Iran spent 2 months saying we are going to respond. They responded on October 1st, so a full 2 months. And then, when the Iranian leadership saw it as expedient and in their interest, that's when they struck Tel Aviv. Mohammad, this duty to defend itself that is announced and claimed by the Iranian government, where do you expect that to go?
Without a doubt, Iran is going to retaliate. The Iranians showed strategic patience for a number of years. The Israelis and the Americans carried out a major cyber attack against Iran. It was the first cyber attack on a country since the internet was born. They assassinated a number of Iranian scientists, including a colleague of mine at the University of Tehran who was murdered in front of his wife. And they carried out other assassinations in Syria when Iranian officers who were fighting against ISIS and Al-Qaeda and other terror groups, the Israelis would attack them. But after the attack on the embassy in Damascus, that changed. Iran put aside that policy and decided to retaliate. And after the martyrdom of Ismail Haniyeh, the Iranians said they will strike again. And after this strike, Iran will again strike the Israeli regime, because we have to remember, the Iranians are the ones who are retaliating, not the Israelis. The Israelis were the ones who bombed the embassy, and then it was the Israelis who assassinated an official guest of the president-elect who came to participate in his inaugural ceremony. But two other things I just would quickly like to point out. One is that the only reason why Israeli jets returned to Israel was because they came nowhere near the Iranian border. The Jordanian regime facilitated the jets to fly over their airspace, and they fired missiles from there. What the Iranians were capable of doing was that they downed over half of those missiles, and they caused many of the other missiles to hit, as I said earlier, decoys or dummies, and to miss their targets, and some hit their targets as well. So the Israeli Air Force came nowhere near the Iranian border.
Yossi, is Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, still trying to reshape the Middle East? Because 2 weeks ago, officially, that's what he was about.
He doesn't tell me about his plans.
I know that. But what do you read into what he's doing?
I'm saying that I believe that he is more clever than somebody who thinks that he's going to reshape the Middle East. I mean, I think that after 1 year, we can understand better what is the situation right now. Hamas is much weaker than before. And for me, at least, it is good news because Hamas was the most important spoiler on the Palestinian side of the peace process since many years. And for me, the main reason why I began the Oslo process was the feeling that Hamas is becoming stronger and stronger in the Palestinian camp, and that if Hamas is winning and Hamas doesn't want to have any kind of peace with Israel, doesn't want to recognize Israel or whatever, then we are doomed. Now, on the northern front, Hezbollah is weaker than before, but it exists and it is acting, and it is part of a state, a very a flawed state, but it is a state. And I hope that with Hamas it would be possible to get, with Hezbollah, it would be possible to get to an agreement through third side or whatever about the future, which will resemble very much the UN Resolution 1701. About Iran. Iran did not participate directly against Israel for many years and preferred the proxies, mainly Hezbollah and Hamas, but also the Houthis, to act against Israel. It is the first time that it finds itself facing Israel. So in this confrontation, which was actually new for both sides, it is, I believe, clear that none of us is going to destroy the other. And that even if Iran doesn't want to recognize the existence of Israel and wants it to be eliminated, although it is a member of the UN, if I'm not wrong, then we have to see whether it is not impossible to think about a modus vivendi. Maybe it is impossible, but I would like to think that there is a possibility that there will be, through a third party, some arrangements, at least arrangements. There is not going to be peace, apparently, but arrangements in which we can live in the future in a much safer situation than before.
So I asked you whether Netanyahu was still trying to reshape the Middle East, because those are words that he used a couple weeks ago. The most obvious reshaping that is taking place in the Middle East right now that I can see is in Gaza. It's not in Iran. It remains in Gaza, and it's what's been going on for a year. I mean, northern Gaza is being emptied. The so-called humanitarian zone of al-Mawasi, further south in the Strip, is being widened. It does not seem that the attack in Iran is going to bring major changes based on what you're all telling me. I think there's agreement on that. But the ongoing attacks in Gaza, those, and Roxane, I'll put this one to you, those are reshaping the Gaza Strip.
Well, and I think it's also important to note that this attack last night on Iran was accompanied by quite a significant attack on Damascus and different parts of Syria.
Yes.
And I think simply a reminder that this is quite a distributed war, part of which I think has served to take the attention off of Gaza. But I think it is quite clear that both the south of Lebanon, the West Bank, and Gaza are all undergoing significant change as a result of the degree of attack that is being taken place. And therefore, there is real question whether there might not be quite a bit of change in the border area or even in the settlement area of Israel, and how Netanyahu sees that. And I think it will be quite difficult to find a modus to bring in other powers to help rebuild Gaza without there being a real possibility that it could be defined by a change in policy in Jerusalem as to what will happen to that land.
Well, Yossi, it was only a few days ago that the Israeli Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir attended a Resettle Gaza conference. That was the official name of the conference, Resettle Gaza. And it took place symbolically, of course, just a few kilometers away from the Strip. Based on the Israeli media reporting that I read, you could hear actually the bombing taking place in Gaza from the site of the conference that was just 2 or 3 kilometers away. Do you see a future where the Israeli government would allow the ultra-nationalists to get their dream and resettle Gaza in whole or in part?
No, I don't see such a situation. Even Netanyahu said that in no way that Israel will resettle the Gaza Strip. And I think that Ben Gvir doesn't deserve any reaction.
Why?
He's not
why
a
though? He's a cabinet. No, but why? He's a cabinet minister.
I agree. Regretfully, he is a cabinet minister, and I hope that it won't take long until he is not.
Yeah, but I understand what you're saying, but he is. You know, when you say he's not worthy of a reaction or we shouldn't pay attention to him, I understand that that might be your opinion, that you'd rather not pay attention to him, but...
I'm speaking about myself. No, my dear, I mean, you can react to him. I usually, when he is in a TV studio, I'm going out of the studio. I never agreed to appear with him for years. He is bad news. What Netanyahu did
but he's in power. That's why I ask you about him.
Is crazy. Is crazy, and I don't react to him. But you are, of course, you have your full right to react to him.
Yeah, but it's not because it's sensationalist or makes headlines or it's a juicy story. That's not the reason I ask you about this. The reason I ask you about this is he seems to get his way pretty often. And it seems that Netanyahu is trending in the Ben Gvir Smotrich direction more than he's trending in any other direction, as far as I can tell.
He put himself, Netanyahu, in a situation where he is dependent on these people. This was not a must, but he decided to form a government with people with whom he had said in the past he would never sit together. This is the fruit. He is paying the price for it, and you are right. I mean, he has Ben Gvir has the microphone, and Smotrich has his microphone, and they are talking nonsense. And I'm not in a situation to tell you that they have no power at all. I never react to them.
Yeah, no, I guess the point I'm making is that saying they're talking nonsense, I think from a journalistic standpoint, could be a very generous interpretation of what is really going on. They are cabinet ministers, these two men, and they are in a government, and they're saying we want to resettle Gaza. And what we're seeing on the ground suggests that actually, you know what, that could happen. Why do I say this? Because civilians are being forced out of northern Gaza. And, you know, when you connect the dots, the picture that is formed is more consistent with maybe Israel resettling parts of Gaza than the opposite.
Well, I don't think that it will happen. And as I said, I hope that these people will not stay in the government for long, because it is a stain on our state.
Roxane, it struck me as I was preparing for the show that Benjamin Netanyahu has done something that many commentators for the past year of this Gaza war have told me he was trying to do, which was to outlast Joe Biden. We're now 10 days away from the U.S. presidential election. Joe Biden will not be the next president, regardless of who wins on November 5th. And so we can already say at this date that Benjamin Netanyahu has outlasted Joe Biden. It's pretty crazy when you think back to where we were in October 2023.
Well, I think we need to step back and see how we got here. I think the hope that Joe Biden is certainly putting forward is that his party remains in power, and that even if it is not him, it is Kamala Harris. And so far, we're seeing that she is more or less following the Biden policy towards this area of the world, towards this war, and towards Israel that Biden has. And I think that should she win, there is a hope that perhaps that might shift somewhat. And if after all she doesn't win and it is Trump that wins, then I think that we have already a pretty good blueprint of how he supports Netanyahu and a number of the claims that Israel has made in the past, and that this will end in a different way. So I think in that case, it's more likely that there will actually be quite a bit of change in the borders of the Middle East.
Mohammad, let me bring you back in and thank you for your patience. As you look at this from Tehran, I mean the Gaza part of this, how do you analyze this? Where do you think it might be going?
In Gaza, we have a genocide. We have an ongoing Holocaust. We see the northern Gaza being starved and people being massacred with the support of the West. So the West here is also destroying its image across the world. The world sees what's going on in Gaza. This is not like the genocides of old. These are being carried out in front of our eyes. And this is going to have an enormous impact in the future, because the world has changed and attitudes towards the Israeli regime have changed. Yeah, the martyrdom of Yahya Sinwar is not going to weaken Hamas. It's going to make it much more popular. And today, when we see that the Israeli regime is being defeated on the borders with Lebanon, Hezbollah is emerging stronger despite the martyrdom of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. The fact that the Israeli regime can't make inroads into Lebanon after a month says a lot. And these miscalculations are based upon the fact that they don't recognize that the world has changed, but also the region has changed, and the people of Lebanon and Palestine have changed. So ultimately, I think that we are going to see a defeat. Netanyahu will not succeed. He can expand all he wants, but in the past, the Israelis, when they attacked Egypt, they went all the way to the Suez Canal. Here, they can't take a dot on the map called Gaza. In 1982, they invaded Lebanon, went all the way to Beirut in days. Here, they're stuck on the border after a month, even though they've murdered Yahya Sinwar and Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. And I think that shows that the world has changed and that the Americans and Europeans are going to have to face reality.
Well, that's the time we have for today. I want to thank all our guests for taking part in this discussion. That's Yossi Beilin, Mohammad Marandi, and Roxane Farmanfarmaian. Thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle there is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Cyril Vanier, and the entire team here in Doha, bye for now.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.